Version Luna 8 of Genshin Impact once again expands the ever-growing array of powerful editing tools in Miliastra Wonderland. With the introduction of the vehicle system, motion control devices, new 3D objects, object coloring, and skill pre-aim for MOBA games, the creative possibilities are limitless. For today's tutorial, we'll dive deep into the new persistent cursor feature and explore how you can use it to expand your game design capabilities. Once inside the Miliastra editor, you want to go ahead and go to the combat preset, which is the fourth tab in this main menu right here. And then under player template, you can see that there's a new setting called cursor configuration. Now by default, this is turned off, but you can turn it on so that during the whole runtime of your game, the cursor is visible to the player. Now, what if you only want your cursor to appear in certain parts of your game, for example, in a puzzle area where a cursor is needed? Then what you can do is turn off this setting right here and configure that through a node graph. You can actually activate this setting to a node graph, and you can do that by adding a new server node graph with a logic wherein when a certain event happens, then it will turn on the cursor configuration settings, which basically allows you to show the cursor during the game's runtime. And the node that we want is actually called set player's cursor to always visible. Now, once you click on it, you can set up different settings over here, like the player entity that you want to be affected by this. And here, the always show cursor, you can turn on, which is basically the same settings as we did earlier. But in this case, we can actually set an event that will trigger turning on the settings right here. For example, when entering a collision trigger, then it will turn on the cursor for this specific player. For the sake of this tutorial, I will just go ahead and turn the cursor on by default during the game's entire runtime to make it simple. And now let's move on to the other settings inside the cursor configuration. Alright, so clickable layers, this basically determines which categories the cursor can interact with. And there are several options that are available, which are the scene, the hurtbox, the object collision, and the new thing called cursor collision, which we will talk about later on in this video. Basically, the scene will let you interact with the terrain or the environment of the stage. Then the hurtbox, basically most entities have this by default, so this lets you interact with the hurtbox of the combat hit targets. And then for object collision, which is you can turn this on by inside the settings of the objects itself. You can also turn this on so that you can interact with those native collision boxes. Now, what exactly is Cursor Collision Box? Well, this is actually a new component that they added in relation to the persistent cursor feature that they added in this version. So this basically lets us set an area around an entity or an object, and this area basically tells the cursor or lets the cursor interact with that object. So under the component settings, when you add a new component, you can see that there's a new component there called Cursor Collision Box. And when you click on it, right here, go to the advanced settings, and you'll see that we have a new settings that we can configure. Now, you can choose different shapes depending on the entity that we want to attach this on. Now, since we're using slime and they're spherical, we just want to use a sphere shape. Now, be sure that your area covers the entire slime so that we don't face any situations where clicking on it doesn't do anything. So be sure to do that. And once you're done, then you're all set up. Now, in order to make use of the cursor collision box and the cursor itself, we actually want to create a skill. And to do that, you go to the fourth tab, which is the combat preset. Go to the skills right here, and you want to create a character custom skill. And I already created one right here, which is I named this tap to destroy. And that's basically what this skill will do. You tap on the entity that you have the cursor collision box enabled, then once you tap on it, then the entity will disappear. And in order to do that, go to this right here, and you want to make sure that this is an instant skill, since we don't want any animations really uh, for the characters. Next, you just want to turn off the cooldown of this skill, since we don't really want any cooldowns for the skill right here, for the tap to destroy skill. And we want to enable the pre-aim, mostly because we want the data from the pre-aim raycast in order to choose which object or entity we want to destroy. So we want just to turn that on, and in here you want to turn and choose the cursor collision box again right here. And yeah, I will just leave the default settings for this and not move this at all. Next, you just want to exit out of the skill pre-aim settings and go to the animation editor. And in here, you don't really need to add any animations, since this is an instant skill. And what you want to add is a node graph for the start event track. In order to do that, we want to go to Miliastra Sandbox, and we need to create two node graphs. The first node graph, you want to go and do that under the Client Node Graph Resource Explorer. Now, once you click that, it will take you here, and under Character Skill Node Graph, you want to create a node graph called Tap to Destroy, which is basically the logic is basically when you tap on this, you will send a signal to the server node graph that a click or from the cursor has happened. So from the node graph starts, you want to extend that and do a double branch, wherein we will just check for a few things. And the first one we want to add is a get pre-aim ray hit info, and this is basically why we added or we enabled the skill pre-aim, is so that we can get the raycast information. The raycast, which is basically wherever our cursor is on. For example, if we put our cursor towards the slime, the pyro slime, then it will detect the information right over here. So the on hit entity, we want to query that the entity is on the field, just to be double check. And if it is true and that it is on the field, we want to go ahead and send a signal to the server node graph. Now, in order to do that, we also want to add a new server signal explorer. You can click on that and just create a new signal. In this case, I just named it remove entity. And we also want to add in information for the GUID. Since we're already here, we can also query the GUID of the entity right over here, and we send that signal as well right over here. So just create that. So add a signal, add a parameter called GUID, and set this one to GUID, and then apply the changes, and then you'll be able to go over here and click that and select the remove entity signal, and it will send two signals or two information, basically that a cursor click has happened, and it will also send the GUID information from the entity. All right. So once you've done that, you want to go back to, or you want to go to the server node graph explorer, and you want to create this the second node graph. I just named it on skill tab. And this node graph basically receives every signal that is sent or being sent through from the client side. In our case, that is whenever the cursor interacts with a cursor collision box, it will send a signal and it will monitor here. So once that signal is passed through, we want basically, if you want the basic of basics, we want to just, in this case, remove the entity, correct? So if we do that and we remove the entity, it will just remove it from the stage. Now, if we do want to add some timed effects, for example, if we want a vanishing effect, whenever we click on the entity, then we want to set up a few things. One of the things that we want to prepare is a dedicated VFX player. Now, we need this because in our case, we are going to be removing the entity itself. So we cannot use this as our target entity for the playtime effects node. What we need is this one, a dedicated VFX player that stays in our stage uh, all throughout the runtime and is just invisible. And we want to take this, and so just create an empty object right over here and rename this to be the VFX player, and you're good to go. That's the only thing that you need. We also want to place this VFX player into our stage, and we want to specifically put this in the location 0, 0, 0, and the reason will be made clear later on into our node graph. So let's go back to the node graph that we were creating earlier on. Now, before we remove the entity, we actually want to save the location of the entity we just clicked in order for an effect to be played on that location. So in order to do that, we want to create first a node graph variable right over here. So you can click that over here, create a location, just name it location, and change this to 3D vector. And just set this to 0, 0, 0 as a default value right over here. And then we want to query the entity by GUID and take the GUID information from earlier from the signal, and then get the entity location and rotation, and then send that to the node graph variable right over here. And we set the node graph variable to the variable value that we set from the location right over here. And in this part, the location of the entity will be saved. Now, once that information is saved, you can safely remove the entity right here. So just go ahead and make a flow to remove the entity. And then we want to play a timed effect. So choose an effect to your liking. I chose a light beam ascending effect right over here under play timed effects node. And as for the target entity, we want to query entity by GUID and choose the VFX player that we created earlier and set this as the target entity. The attachment point name will be the default GI root node. And then as for the location offset, we want to get the node graph variable that we set earlier, and this will contain the location that we saved earlier as the variable value, and we just want to send that information in the location offset. Once that is done and set up, you're good to go. Just save that node graph, save this node graph also, just be sure, and then go back to our editor. Back in the animation timeline of our tap to destroy skill, we just want to make sure that we add the node graph, the client node graph that we just created to the start event track. So make sure to add that, click on that plus sign and click on the tap to destroy node graph right over here. Since we already have it, I'm not going to click it. So just go ahead and do that. And make sure to save it, exit out of this, and save it one more time. Since there's a triangle right here, it means that it's not been saved yet. So make sure to save that, and you're basically good to go. Everything has been set up. A word of caution: there is actually a special note in the Miliastra official guide, and that pertains to mobile devices. Since they don't have cursors, we need to add a unit status actually to our character. And there's a specific effect called click to release skill. So if you try to find that right here, just make sure to click on that, click to release skill, and you will be asked to choose a skill that is connected to the screen tab. And since we already created one, we're just gonna choose that, tap to destroy. And what this basically means is that instead of a cursor for mobile devices, they can just tap on the screen, and it will create the same effect. So make sure to add that. So create first that unit status. I just named it screen tap. Make sure to tap to destroy, and I just set the duration to infinite right over here. And go back to the player settings. Under edit character, we want to add that unit status right here. So advanced editing right here, and add screen tap. So add the status called screen tap that we just created. And after you do that, just click that and then save everything, and your stage is basically done. Now we want to go back to our object placement, and in here we just want to create, or we just want to add all of the objects that, or entities that have the object collision. So just to test it out, I added 4 entities that have the object or the cursor collision box right here. And then if we try to test play it, you will see the effect that we just did from the node graph and everything. So let's start the game. And I just set this as a 2.5D camera so that I can see everything clearly. But they're attacking me because that's their default settings, is to attack. And if you tap on it, then it will just be removed. So there's that, that, and you can see that the effect is working. Now you can also change their behavior. They just had their default behavior as attacking, so you can also go ahead and change that in the entity settings. You can set their battle stance to be not aggro or anything. But yeah, as you can see, it is working. When you click on the entity, that they will be removed and it will play an effect. And that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I can't wait to see what you guys create using this new feature. So bye.